Woman, you are set free. Woman, you are set free. A woman enters the synagogue, bent over for 18 long years, only able to see the ground in front of her. She is here, like many others, to observe the Sabbath, a day set aside by Jewish law to cease all labor and to worship. Woman, you are set free. Jesus is teaching in the synagogue. He notices the bent-over woman. She does not speak. She does not ask him anything. And yet, Jesus calls her forward. Imagine this moment. This woman bent over, eyes downcast, shuffling forward into the synagogue, waiting to listen to scriptures read, teachings given. She is not expecting anything new, not expecting anything different than what she has done every Sabbath day her entire life. And then she hears this voice, the voice of that one rabbi, the controversial one, the one who seems to be making quite a stir wherever he goes. Is he really calling her over? Is he sure he's beckoning the right person? And yet, she responds to his voice. She moves towards him. She leans in with all the uncertainty that that moment holds. Woman, you are set free. Jesus lays hands on this woman, and immediately she feels her spine loosening, the strength in her back returning. She rises up, standing tall for the first time in 2 decades. Can you imagine what that moment must have felt like? 18 years stooped over, 18 years only able to see the ground in front of her. 18 years, and maybe more, on the edges of society, and now she rises to her full stature. Woman, you are set free. It is no coincidence that the gospel writer shares how long this woman had her condition. The story is not just about physical healing today. Luke is telling us something very different, something collective. Many commentaries note that the inclusion of the number 18, the 18 years she was bent over, was likely an allusion to the history of oppression suffered by her people, connecting her bondage to the story of captivity that the Israelites experienced in their bondage under Egypt. Jesus uses language like crippled by spirit and whom Satan has kept bound, because these phrases carry cultural and theological weight. They are touch points that would have resonated with the listeners of that day. And this healing occurs not just on any day. It is the Sabbath. What is happening in this story is happening inside the memory of liberation, inside the heartbeat of God's covenant. When God gives Moses 10 commandments in Deuteronomy, God expands the concept of Sabbath from one primarily of rest to one that now includes freedom. A day to remember God's liberating power from captivity in Egypt and to recognize the story of God's liberating work throughout history. This same vision of Sabbath as liberation and not mere rest echoes in the prophet Isaiah's words that we read this morning, connecting the practice of Sabbath with practices that remove all oppression and satisfy the needs of the afflicted, among other things. Again, Sabbath is not just rest, though rest is important. It is also repair. It is restoration. It turns us away from exploitation of ourselves and of others, from our self-centeredness, and turns us towards community and care. It is a holy reorientation of our lives. Woman, you are set free. Jesus could have waited to heal her the next day after the Sabbath. Her condition was likely chronic. It was not acute. But you know what? He doesn't wait. He is not simply teaching in the synagogue on the Sabbath. He is performing the Torah's deepest promise, that those who are bent low by the weight of suffering, shame, and oppression, they are seen, they are called forth and liberated. That is why the Sabbath is the perfect day for this healing and not the wrong day, as religious leaders tried to argue. Woman, you are set free. And this healing isn't just about what Jesus does. It is also about how this woman responds. What does she do after being lifted up to this new way of life? She praises God. Her response to freedom is worship. And that response is no small thing. Worship is more than singing songs on a Sunday or observing Sabbath rituals. Also important, but that is not everything. While these practices and rituals help usher us into a space of worship, they are not the fullness of it. Worship is not confined to a time or place. It is a very way of being. It is a transformative act, one that reorients our lives towards God's liberating presence. True worship moves us beyond mere ritual, and it calls us into recognition of who God is, of who we are, and of the freedom we have been given. It calls us into relationship, and it reminds us that freedom, real freedom, isn't just a state we experience. It is a posture, a way of living that we learn to inhabit. And this theme, this thread of freedom or liberation, runs throughout the book of Luke. In fact, we see it woven among all the Gospels. Again and again, Jesus is loosening that what binds us personally and communally. And more than that, he is doing something else. Again, he is reorienting us to that what matters. Reorienting us to right relationship with God, and by extension, with all of creation. Theologian and cultural critic Marcia Polly invites us to reflect more deeply on this idea of freedom. She challenges the dominant cultural view, especially that of our modern Western world, that freedom means absolute independence, doing whatever we want whenever we want, without constraint. But real freedom, she argues, is something far richer. It is about relational responsibility, the freedom to live rightly with God and with neighbor. Freedom is not rooted in isolation, but in mutual care and responsibility, again, orienting us towards what really matters. Woman, you are set free. So, if true freedom reorients us to what matters most, what does that actually mean for us today? We live in a world that talks a lot about freedom, and especially a country that talks a lot about freedom. The freedom to move, the freedom to express, to choose, to achieve. And yet, many of us don't feel very free. Have you noticed that? South Korean philosopher Byung-Chul Han calls this out. He warns that the way we understand freedom today can actually become a trap. He names it false freedom, a version of freedom that's really just pressure to constantly improve, to optimize, and to perform. It's that feeling that you're never doing enough, that your value comes from how productive you are, how fit your body or mind is, how impressive your resume looks, how committed you are to activism, who your friends are, what your social media presence conveys. Does that sound familiar? And here's the thing. None of these practices, these activities in and of themselves are a problem. Self-improvement can be crucial to overall well-being. Activism is vital to sustaining our social fabric. And social media can build purposeful connections and provide very cute cat videos. But when disconnected from love, disconnected from our relationships, from community, from God, it stops being freedom. It is a false freedom, one that may look good externally, but really wears us down internally. Like the woman in today's gospel, we may not even realize that we are bent low. So I wonder, what are the burdens that you carry? I wonder, what leaves you unable to see beyond the dust in front of your feet because you are bent so low? Maybe it's the anxiety of accumulating bills and never enough income. Maybe it's the hurt of strained relationships with family and friends. Maybe it's the stress of caregiving or the silence of loneliness. Maybe it is the ache under empire, wars you didn't start, systems you didn't choose, debts you didn't ask for. What is the name of the thing that has bent you over for far too long? Whatever it is, you don't need to name it out loud, but can you feel it? Can you feel it in your body, that weight in your body? Woman, you are set free. And today, if Jesus were to enter our homes, our sacred spaces, our neighborhoods, who would he see bent low? Who among us is bearing the weight of 18 years or more of struggle? As Jesus' teachings often reveal, liberation is never one-dimensional. It moves through the personal, through the political, and spiritual realms all at once. To separate these dimensions is to miss the fullness of what God intends when God sets us free. And if liberation is never one-dimensional, then it cannot end with just my healing or your release. if true freedom reorients us towards what matters most, then we must ask not only what has me bent low, but what is bending us. What burdens do we carry not just in our bodies, but in our systems, our neighborhoods, and our shared lives together? So I wonder, are we being set free? Are we set free? We are living in a time when the aches of the world, the burdens of those most vulnerable, and our own personal weights we carry may seem unbearable. Or maybe, like the bent-over woman, we just got used to them and aren't even looking for healing or freedom. And yet, we must be attentive. We must be attentive to those moments of God's inbreaking in our lives and in the world around us. And here's the thing. God's freedom, God's inbreaking into our lives and our world probably doesn't always come as a dramatic healing story or a lightning bolt miracle. Sometimes it comes in quiet, ordinary ways, moments of liberation that interrupt the grind and remind us of who we are and whose we are. I want you to take a moment and reflect. Where have you experienced divine interruption in your life? Where have you experienced a moment, just a moment of healing, a moment of freedom? Was it through an act of service, providing care to someone in need? Maybe a hard and healing conversation with a friend or family member. Was it standing watch at an apartment building, making sure ICE officers cannot harass families? Maybe you experienced a release of tears while listening to a song that touches your soul. A moment of meditation, of prayer, of contemplation. For those of you who know me, it is always a good dance party. And as I learned from last week's 40s, 50s karaoke party, that was pretty much like God here on earth. That was amazing. For me, that dance party, it's a moment when I can be fully present to music and movement, letting go of all that holds me down and feeling lifted up by the joy of community. These are Sabbath moments, fragments of freedom. They are sacred interruptions, and they help to reorient us back to God, back to one another, and back to ourselves, back to what matters most. Because freedom is not an abstract idea. It is lived, it is practiced, it is shared. And today, we don't just talk about it, we get to witness it. In the waters of baptism, we are reminded that this liberation, this freedom Jesus offers, is not theoretical. It is embodied. It is here. It is in this sanctuary, it is in this community, and it is in the rising of a child of God into new life. Our baptismal covenant reminds us that freedom isn't about escape or self-sufficiency. It is about belonging to one another and to God. It is about dying to the lie that we are alone forever and we will be bent over forever, and rising to a new way of being, one that is rooted in our shared humanity, God's divine presence, and a promise that Jesus is inviting us to be set free. So, woman, beloved, we are set free. Amen.